Thank you very much for an excellent panel. I realise I've made a major structural error by being the one to shove an interesting panel off the stage so that I can speak. But sorry about that, but that's the timetable is the timetable. Thank you very, very much, all of you. Thank you. Yeah, you shoved off, yeah. Not physically, well, maybe. Okay, so it now falls to me to say a few words. Firstly, a piece of housekeeping. If this is your earring, then, well, I have it now. Okay, so you better ask me about that. So that's the whole of the structural, whole of the housekeeping. So it falls to me now to do the rather grandly named Conspectus, and those of you who've been to the conference before, I can see you rapidly leaving the building, which makes a lot of sense. Those of you who've not experienced it are foolishly staying to see what on earth this is. So what I'm supposed to try and do is give a summary, a resume of what has happened over the last couple of days. You may have heard a couple of hints from people that I've been a bit strict with the speakers during this conference and in their preparation, and I have given quite a lot of instruction to moderators and speakers. One of the things I said was, if you're giving a presentation, under no circumstances should you use a dictionary definition in any part of your presentation. So this is breaking the rules. So there's a sort of bingo opportunity now that every time in this presentation of about 15 minutes, you notice me breaking an obvious rule about how to do presentations, then you could hold up a sign saying bingo or something. Amongst the rules that I set for people was, under no circumstances should your slides be a bunch of bullet points, especially if they're just basically your speaker notes. That's completely forbidden. No dictionaries. No running over time, no stupid graphics. They've got to be meaningful and purposeful. So just as I go through this, feel free to even shout out bingo when you notice that I'm breaking one of those rules. They're my rules, I can break them, what the heck. So it's been 11 years of doing this. Sometimes I've done it. I suggested this as an idea originally to the ASA conference, and foolishly I ended up doing it, doing these kind of conference summaries. This is 2018. There's a whole series of them, and it's me standing up shouting like this, and so I'm being stalked.
You might have lost a phone.
Oh, okay. Yeah, would you like an earring? I've got an earring. Okay. So, this is characteristic poses I've been doing. Sometimes I persuaded somebody else to do it. It's quite challenging running a conference for 2 days while simultaneously trying to write down brilliant insights of what's gone on, as you can imagine. So sometimes I've managed to trick somebody else into doing it, so that's worked quite well. And each year we kind of have a bit of a sort of theme. I try to come up with a framework about what I'm saying over the years. So one year, my favorite, I think, was when I used photographs of my 2 sons and their 4 cousins to illustrate basically fundamental, profound messages about scholarly publishing. So this is a photograph from many years ago of my oldest son and his cousins. My youngest was absent. And their thoughts on scholarly communications. So as you can see, looking across the landscape there, some of them were just wildly enthusiastic about the whole business. Some had some questions to ask. Some were just like a bit confused about the whole thing. Some were not really paying attention, and some just didn't care about the whole business. So I don't know which camp each of you fall into, but the very fact you're here suggests you're sort of not one of these people. But that was kind of fun to do. So that was one theme I went with. What's this year's theme that I can hold this around? I thought of doing alliteration, so that's a lot of fun, so you can just try and categorize it all by the letters of the alphabet. I was prompted to do this because actually the last one, my degree, my undergraduate degree is PPP. So while you think for a moment, what can those 3 Ps be? I was prompted on this because one of them is actually physiology. So my degree is in philosophy, psychology, and physiology, rather oddly. Mostly philosophy and psychology, but a little bit of physiology. And I thought, no, I can't do that. Let's do something else. So actually I went back to 2018. So this little tug of war that's going on here, I thought I'd revisit that tug of war and basically look at how, people are pulling in opposite directions and themes are pulling in opposite directions. And a few people have said to me, oh, that last presentation or that last panel was kind of people were contradicting each other, and I'm going, yes, and they kind of are, and they're both true, and it's a kind of weird thing. So I'm not trying to position this as a conflict, particularly between researchers and publishers, as often occurs. And mostly that conflict is expressed in a publisher conference, kind of pretending a conflict with absent researchers, or a research meeting pretending a conflict with absent publishers. It's not good versus evil. That would be quite inappropriate and irresponsible to use photographs that other people have used in the program to sort of illustrate a kind of good versus evil, or a terrified, adorable panda and some creature. Or, is it the other way around? You can go either way on that. And in the middle, there's David sitting there being a librarian, refereeing in a way between these two, or being the nexus and the connection point. And so it's very important that librarians have their key, powerful role in doing this. Actually, I was then aided by another illustration. I thought, well, maybe that's more the vibe that we're looking for in the authoritative librarian, but I'm not sure which it is. But I need to say, it's not this, right? This is what we're trying at R2R to make it not. It's not two opposing camps opposing each other. It's a group of people collaborating to make something happen. And there's lots of problems with that collaboration, and it's broken in lots of places. But this is what we're trying to do here. And when I go to a publishing conference and there's one librarian kind of speaking up for librarians, it doesn't work. But this is what we're trying to do. But what are these tensions? So there's a bunch of tensions that I noticed over the last 2 days. There's a kind of responsibility versus irresponsibility thing. Who's to blame for getting things wrong? So here are some bullet points to illustrate that. So who's supposed to be setting these responsibilities and incentives? And an example I want to use is retraction. You read an announcement which says, publisher, Elsevier has retracted, sorry, you weren't a sponsor, so I had to, anyway, Elsevier has retracted this terrible paper, and the Academy go, yeah, whatever. It doesn't say the University of Woolloomooloo has retracted this terrible paper that happens to have been published by Elsevier. It doesn't say the Academy has done some really bad work and somehow got it through all the checks and balances. It's kind of irresponsible that the Academy is not being blamed for this in a sense, and not taking control upstream of that QA responsibility. Equally, researchers are going, well, we'd like your editors to behave like this, and the publishers are going, yeah, we don't care, really. I mean, this is what it is. So there's a bit of that, but there is this dialogue. We are starting to have dialogue here and elsewhere, which is kind of taking us somewhere, which I'm hoping is going to really improve things long after I'm dead. Rewards and incentives are wrong. There isn't academic credit for peer review. I've spoken to 2 people in the room in the last couple of days talking about there's 2 kinds of places where you get credit for academic peer review. One is in continuing medical education, where you get points for having contributed to the corpus through peer review. And the other one, anyone know what, I know one person knows what that INS stands for? So Ed gave me this one, it was brilliant, which is the Immigration and Naturalization Service in the States. So they write to Springer Nature and say, this chap's applied for a green card. Has he or she actually done the peer review they claim to have been doing? So there's a one moment where, as you're being dragged into the ICE van, you shout, no, I've done peer review, let go of me. I mean, it's kind of, there should be better uses for that credit. And can publishers upstream these quality improvements? Can publishers persuade the Academy to give credit for peer review so that peer review then works all the way through the life cycle? And I'm seeing, that tension. And there's loads of habits and practices. The other thing I learned, which was interesting, was that, old geezers like me, and we had a couple of great research people with a lot of experience in the room, who were saying, actually, it's the old, senior, experienced, published academics who have the power to break the mold, because they're the ones that don't really care anymore. They don't care about where they're published. They don't care about the traditional models. They can actually break those systems. So we can look to them to do that, not just the new, eager kind of change agents. So I saw a lot of that over the 2 days. There was some stuff about control and freedom. So Rick was on this stage talking about the dangers of authoritarian, while also claiming to be a timekeeping Nazi, so I was a bit uncomfortable about that. But anyway, I kind of got the idea of it. So do we want more control and regulation and authorization of things at a time of increasing authoritarianism in the world? Do we care how unregulated preprints are, or do we care about speed and just communicating as fast as we can? What do we think about the freedom to publish, even if you don't get through the kind of gatekeeping? And I'll come on to that. So we need governments and controls and barriers and standards, but we also need freedoms and lack of biases and prejudice and things holding us back. And one of those is, we talked in the early keynote, but also later, about identity and gatekeeping. So we don't want barriers, but if Sarah's in the room, please don't blurt about this. We do want kind of good discrimination. We do want to discriminate between bad actors and good actors, somehow. But most of the obvious ways to do that are terrible ways to do that. You know, do you have a strong publishing history? Are you part of the club? Do you work somewhere that we like? You know, have we heard of you? These are all terrible ways to go, are you a good actor or a bad actor? And Nikesh talked about calibration. You know, I mean, how are we calibrating how we're making these judgments? And if you just go, well, all papers from China are dodgy, you've got a real problem. I think there was talk about author roles. I think that can be powerful. We've talked about open peer review. We've talked about automated peer review. But then we've talked about the embedded biases of automated systems. So there's a load of challenges in there about, you know, here is an author. Are they a good author? And we need good systems to try and fix that. And again, that's not just down to publishers. That's down to the academy, potentially down to librarians, to all work together on that. So that's one of the themes that came out for me. Part of that is, you know, is experts. You know, I mean, the opening keynote. You know, I hope the pilot of this plane that I'm on actually is a pilot. You know, I hope the author of this paper is actually a research scientist. And you counter that. I can never resist using Michael Grove's great comment. You know, people in this country have had enough of experts. He famously said during the Brexit discussions. I mean, to be fair, he was mostly talking about economists. There was an economist in the room. Have you gone home? No. Well, anyway, so, you know, we do need to know who are the real actors in this while still not excluding. There was some tension between agnosticism and proprietarism, and that also talks about speed and efficiency. I really liked horizontal cascade across all publishers and, you know, all venues of publication, rather than cascade from our best journal to our worst journal, which always seemed to me like a terrible thing. Journal agnostic peer review sounded great. And then there's a, you know, great panel going, this is great. Journal agnostic peer review is intrinsically a wonderful thing, but nobody seems to be doing it or liking it or using it. And I think, again, that's researchers. And I think Johnny was saying, you know, we need to make researchers do these things, and there are no consequences. Somebody asked a question, it might have been Johnny, talked about what are the consequences? And he actually meant, what are the consequences of good people not doing good things? And it was interpreted, I heard kind of the answer, it was interpreted as, why do bad actors not suffer consequence for their bad behavior? But it kind of wasn't that. I mean, that's a good thing too. But it was, why, if we're trying to get people to do the right thing, why is there no consequence for not doing that right thing? And that seems to be a profound problem. And it's a problem, again, of not engaging with the actual people who need to be encouraged. There's this complexity and simplicity tension, you know. Really interesting. You know, it used to be easy. I mean, we heard an academic say, you know, it used to be I just wrote a paper and I sent it to the journal I liked the look of and they just published it and the library paid for it and it was fine. Now it's fantastically complex. And we keep inventing new levels of complexity to try and fix a range of problems, but the people we're exposing, you know, to that complexity are struggling with that and struggling to make sense of it. And kind of we, all of us collectively in this room and others like us, it seems to me need to be consolidating and streamlining and removing friction rather than inventing a new way to get round some problem. And I would argue for a drive towards simplicity. But again, this is about also the proprietary versus agnostic. Simplicity, you know, the simplest system would be if there was only one publisher in the world and one university in the world and they just got on with it, you know. But that's not what we want. But we do need less friction. AI, sort of towards the end now, I'm coming to AI at the end. I mean, we've resisted R2R doing anything on AI at all for a while. In the first couple of years, the trouble was, every event I went to where there was an AI panel, it was basically either boffins talking incomprehensibly about technology, but Ian's gone now, so we don't have to worry about that. Or it was pundits going, oh, it's going to be big, you know, or it's going to be the end of the world, you know. So, but that didn't seem very useful. I mean, the debate was fantastic, really enjoyed it, but in some senses it wasn't useful, because it was a bit like that. It's going to be the end of the world. No, it's going to be great. It's going to be the end of the world. It's going to be great. So we kind of resisted that. But then we started workshopping AI, because that felt more practical, or narrow casting AI. So, I think people really enjoyed the discussion about AI in the Global South and how that was kind of working. And that was a kind of different vibe of how AI could be. Danny Kingsley from Australia is a member of our advisory board, and she's a very forthright Australian person. And one of her lines is, "Oh, you used AI for that. Is that because you're lazy or stupid?" And I kind of like it. But it also works both ways, because you could also say something, "Oh, you didn't use AI for that. Is that because you're lazy or stupid?" And really, I should have fed the whole audio of this last 2 days into an AI and said, "Write me a speech," and it would have, and I'm too lazy or stupid to do that, So it counts kind of both ways. Somebody came up with this great line: "It's not artificial and it's not intelligent." I kind of like that. My wife actually, she's writing a book at the moment, and she's using a lot of AI, and she's working really hard not to use AI to write the book, but to use AI as an intelligent assistant to assist her in searching for information, for coming up with new ideas and stuff like that. And so she's using AI as if it's kind of a helpful assistant, but choosing very carefully which part of the assistance, like all assistants really, input is to use. I quite like that. My line that I've used quite a lot is that AI, large language models, are basically mansplaining engines, that they just kind of tell you, stuff you didn't really want to hear, boringly. I loved my friend Claude. I think it's anthropomorphism is a terrible thing. I did actually ask AI to find me some new advisory board members. That was a really interesting exercise. I said, "Can you find me some advisory board members?" The only person it named was Rick Anderson. I see him leaving the room right now, so I'm going to name him. Bye, Rick. But it was kind of interesting. The only existing member it came up with, Rick, it ascribed him to the wrong institution and gave him the wrong job title, which I thought was kind of interesting. But it came up with a whole load of Americans and British people who should be on my board. So then I said, no, what about African people or Asian people? And it did quite well, but it was not super helpful. Fear and mistrust, I think we got into a lot of that about, AI's biases. Firstly, let's do lazy and stupid, just back to that. So Phil was tweeting about this or blurting about this, not sharing failures because they don't want to actually admit they use AI at all. But the fear and mistrust, a lot of that is about injustices built into that. And this weird thing of, does using AI strengthen your position from the Global South, or does it weaken it? And I think that's a really interesting thing. And Sarah, forthright as always, is not a metaphor for colonialism, it is colonialism. Actually, all her blurts begin with that, but it was particularly applicable to this as well. A weapon of mass destruction. I love that. We'll see. Well, I won't see. I'll be long dead. But the good news is we will find out in the end. Towards the end, last thing really for me is there's a lot of talk about community. Lots of stuff. We were workshopping community. We were talking about community here. We are a community. And I think that's really important. It's kind of obviously so. But there's, there isn't the publisher community. There isn't the librarian community or the research community. It's all of us are in this community together. We desperately need more academics. As Tiberius pointed out, we want Office of Research people in this room. We want university vice-chancellors and rectors in this room to really motor through this kind of building this community and getting these conversations sorted out. So that's kind of most of my thoughts thrown together rather quickly in the back of the room, while also making sure there was coffee and stuff like that. So that's been a lot of fun to do. Really, that kind of draws me to the end of my session. And normally at this point, I just sort of collapse and send you to the pub. But I'm just going to ask Tiberius to pop up for a moment and just say the last word or two. But thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mark, and all for being here. I just told Mark going down the stairs that I don't know how I'll prepare this for next year or the year after, because this is so good and hard to match, but I'm sure there should be something. Thank you. I just want to say thank you, everyone, for being welcoming to this, the idea of transition. It was really that all the feedback that I received and shaking hands and meetings at Snow Room and drinks, it were all largely positive. I would say it was surprisingly no one came and punched me in the face saying that we don't want to see you around. So I'd like to thank you once again for participating here, for showing some support for this transition. It is very much needed. I look forward to see you next, and we look forward to see you next year. And if you are participating to the scholarly social drinks this evening, maybe see you at the Mabel Tavern later on. Thank you once again, and I think that's the end, right? Thank you.